Thank you for that very kind introduction. It's so nice to be here and to see all these friendly faces. It's my first time to Singapore, and it's just very, very impressive. We flew in last night, and it's great to be here. First, I want to say that the welcome speeches were just amazing. I've never heard of provosts as we were talk about scaffolding, affordances. Those usually are not the words that come from a provost, so that was very impressive. So I'm excited to be able to share with you a story of over a decade of teaching online. I want to thank Hiro for inviting me here after we met in Barcelona if I say it correctly. And just like the provost was talking about technology transformation, I argue that in our field, everyone says that we should be doing technology transformation, but no one gives guidelines, or they're never doing it themselves. They're never designing those learning environments that we want. And what I want to do is show you what I think is some of the approaches that I've taken that maybe be insightful. I come from the University of Minnesota. Minnesota is right next to Canada. It's just a little bit west of Chicago, so we are not used to this type of weather. And so we were immediately sweating as we entered from the airport. And I run the Learning Technologies Media Lab, which is the newest lab on the campus of the University of Minnesota, where we look at how to use technology for transformation. So let's talk about transformation a little bit. What is transformation? And when you think about that word, what does it mean to you? To me, I always say it's usually about something that changes the way that you think, changes the way that you act, or changes the way that you feel about something. It might have been an experience that you had just recently, or it might have been something that you went through as a child, but you wanted to share that with someone. And so the question then is, what is technology transformation? And what role do we have in this? We're in such an exciting field. And so what can we do about this? And I just want to share with you all the photos that you see throughout this presentation were taken from the many trips around the world. One thing that I want to see is this transformational learning that's not based on age, race, or wealth, but it's about placing opportunities in the hands of learners. That's what I want to see happen, and I know that we can do this. Mike and I were talking about the challenges in Australia, and I was sharing some of the work that I've done in the Arctic and Africa, and they're very, very similar. And I'm going to share with you these principles through the lenses of some of the projects that I've led over the last 10 years. WeExplore is the newest one, Earthducation, North of 60, Flipgrid, Go North, and Geothentic. So you're going to be hearing about all these projects as I talk through the principles of transformation. Again, much like the provost said, he said we need to think about designing experiences. And that's exactly my first principle, designing experiences and not products. And so what that means is that we want to think about engagement and not just completion of something. So we want to have the students reflect on their experience and think about that as one of the best things that they've ever encountered in an online environment. How can we do that? That's the question. And I had that question posed to myself when I was a K-12 teacher. I was a K-12 teacher in southern Minnesota, and I was teaching geography. And I could not get my students engaged. Well, I tell you one thing, I probably wasn't a very good teacher at that point either, but I could not get them engaged. And I was using technology, except I still couldn't get it. And I thought, how can I bring this all together? And I thought, why don't I take my passion, this passion for this changing world, and this passion for technology, and bring those two together. And no matter what you see, how you see yourself about this world and how it's changing, it is changing. I've been to these places, and the places that I've traveled to in the Arctic, I can't travel today. So the world is changing, and it's changing drastically. And I wanted to bring this to the students. I wanted to provide this opportunity for education. I wanted to see this happen. I wanted to see students excited. These are some students in California who are using the Go North project. In other words, I wanted to create change and not simply respond to it. It is so often in our field that all of a sudden something's introduced, like a whiteboard, and then we're supposed to figure out how to use it. And what I'm saying in my field and in what I'm doing at the lab is that we need to identify those issues, and we need to create solutions to them. And how can we do that? Many people believe this cannot happen in education. And I will say to you, I took a different route in the beginning to try to bring this to millions of students. And so here's a little video. And as a former social studies teacher, I show a lot of videos, okay, just so you know. All right, so here's a little intro to some of the work. I'm Aaron Doering from the U of M. To truly understand our impact on the natural world, you have to experience it firsthand. So this is my classroom. Students from around the world join our team online as we research climate change in the Arctic. Together, we learn about our environment and how our actions can make a difference. So the search continues. So that was a 30-second commercial that the University of Minnesota put together to highlight some of their projects over the years. And what that represents is the work that I've been doing in the Arctic, where I actually travel to these locations and identify an issue and the place, and I identify the people that I'm going to work with, and these are actually posters from over the years. And one of the first projects that I did was called Arctic Transect 2004, when I traveled for 6 months across the Canadian Arctic by dog sled, sleeping in a tent with an average temp of minus 40 F, and as we know, C and F meet at minus 40. And over those 6 months, we did an update every single week. We wrote this 300-page curriculum before we left. We built this online learning environment, and we traveled throughout the Canadian Arctic as we gave updates about the issues at hand, from flora and fauna to climate change to whatever the modules were focused on. When we hit the north end of the Baffin Island, we realized that we had engaged millions of learners online. And we had no idea it was going to have that impact. So I put a map down, and I said, okay, we would need to do the entire circumpolar Arctic. So in 2006, we traveled across Alaska with the Gwich'in and the Inupiat from Circle up to Kaktovik. In 2007, I traveled across the Bering Strait to Chukotka, Russia, on the very far east of Russia, as I traveled this area that no one had traveled through in order to bring this online education to students from the tent. In 2008, I traveled across an area known as Fennoscandia, working with the Sami, focused on deforestation. In 2009, went back to one of my favorite places in the Arctic, Canada, in the area known as Nunavut. Nunavut is 3 times the size of Texas, with only 70 miles of roads, and none of them are interconnected. And in 2010, traveled across Greenland. And while I traveled across these places, we wrote this entire curriculum before we left. We built an online learning environment, and we educated students online. And this is pre-MOOC, all right? So we are literally delivering this from the tent. And what we had is something that I never thought would happen, is that we had students that were engaged with us from all around the world. They were from 6 continents, over 3,000 classrooms, and we were engaging these students. And what I always get asked is, what was it actually like out there? Most people don't even want to hear about the online education that I was doing, so I just added little videos to give you some insight to that. I hadn't even looked at myself for over 3-4 weeks, and so to get into our room and to actually see a mirror, it was pretty scary. Not only how I looked, but also how my clothes started to smell. The people of Baker Lake, I was thinking about that last night and how I would describe them. I would say very kind, warm, gracious. I mean, it's just been absolutely wonderful. The most overwhelming thing for me so far has been that they put on a festival down at the community center. And I just thought that was incredible. So as we were traveling, we were on the front sled, and we had been traveling like that for the first 2 days. And we had traveled over a number of leads, lead being a break in the ice that has refrozen. And we had no problem traveling over them. They were all frozen, and we really didn't think much of it. Well, out on the Great Slave Lake then, we were traveling, and as the dogs went across, the front of the sled went across, and all of a sudden we heard a crack, and as I looked down, I saw the sled going down. I don't know why I did it or how I did it, but I just literally leaped. I learned that I can fly today. As the sled and my skis going down, I leaped forward, and everything, thank goodness, worked out just fine. And we lashed back on, and we're warm again, and we're eating. So that's a good thing.
Our part. Food was safe, and we're eating, and I'm very happy about that.
And so that's what it looks like in Minnesota every day. And that is why we have a problem bringing graduate students into our university. That's a joke. All right. So there's just a little insight to some of my experiences as we traveled across the Arctic. And that leads me to principle number 2. And that is the idea of building trust, commitment through experience and attitude. So what do I mean by this? Think about the face-to-face, the brick-and-mortar classroom. what was it like when students first walked in the classroom? The first thing they saw was the instructor. The second thing was the content that that instructor had put together. And the last thing they saw was the design of the lessons, of the activities in the classroom, and so on. Now, think about today's world. That's completely flipped. And so the first thing that you see when you log on now in an online learning environment is the design of the learning environment. And that is what's supposed to bring that student in to get them engaged and motivated. The second thing they normally see is the content that you're delivering. And the last, unfortunately, many times is that instructor. And so when we think about how this has changed, I think about how we design our learning environments. The provost is talking about Coursera. I'm actually using the Ning environment to deliver a MOOC here in January. And I'm delivering it on transformative pedagogy. And the focus, as I'm doing here, is I like to have the social presence and the teaching presence right in the very beginning. I like to have the social aspect of the students on the left-hand side here as they engage with my work. And I want to see that I can build trust from the very beginning because they see me, they see what I'm delivering to them, and they see each other. The importance of the social presence. And that leads to number 3, guide learners as designers, designing for meaning. You know, in our field, we had an individual, David Jonathan, who passed away last year, who I was a huge fan of, who came up with this idea of mind tools and focus on constructivism and so on. And it's absolutely where it should be. It's how do we guide our learners to be designers themselves? Because it's the power of the story that engages us, and every student has a story themselves. So how can we bring this together? As we take a look at some of the early adoptions, I don't know if you ever remember this technology, if you had it here or wherever you are from, but this is called Oregon Trail. It was one of the first technologies that students could get involved with, and it was very, very popular in the States. And I thought about how we can engage learners, and that takes me to one of my next projects, and this is called North of 60. So literally this spring, I traveled across the Arctic, and my goal was for not only me to tell the story of climate change and the changes that are taking place in the Arctic, but was to engage the students themselves so that they could go out and engage their elders, so that they could capture the story and then share it online. And as you can imagine, there are many challenges that you have. Just like in the north end of Australia or in the Arctic or even in Africa, what we find is that it's not only our goal of what we're trying to deliver, but we have our technology issues. We're trying to figure out how to design a learning environment to engage students. So we designed this learning environment, and we sent them what we called one of our technology kits. And in this technology kit, we had an iPod, we had an iPad. We gave them the technology so they could go out and capture and interview the elders on climate change to build this tapestry of Arctic voices. And we designed this learning environment to guide the teachers within these locations on how the students could actually go out and capture it themselves, and then also engage with the curriculum. So if it was in Murmansk, Russia, if it was in Fennoscandia, if it was in the Canadian Arctic, what we were building here were a tapestry of voices, a tapestry of videos that not only that I had collected when I was out there with the elders, but now the students themselves had gone out and interviewed their elders because we wanted to have them capture their story and share it online. We also had the lessons and the educational resources that were available online, and what happened was that the students were very excited. They were very excited because they got to go out and interview their elders, and the elders wanted to share their story. As you can imagine, the loss of language is an issue there, as in many other places of the world. So here's a little insight to our experience over the months within the Canadian Arctic this past year. And what's exciting about this next video is that it also introduces one of the elders who speaks about their life, which has never been, to my knowledge, documented at this level. My name is Doering, and I am a professor of learning technologies at the University of Minnesota. And I'm also the expedition leader for the North of 60 expedition here in the Canadian Arctic. The mission of this project is to create a tapestry of Arctic voices. The Inuit elders, Chukchi, Yupik, people throughout the entire circumpolar Arctic can share their voices with the world. The interviews that we've been doing are with elders who want to share their stories. They want to have the people in the South to understand how things are changing here. And there's a common strand, there's a common theme that goes throughout, and that theme is that things have changed drastically here within the last 30 years especially. Everyone talks about the sea ice, everyone talks about the new way of life, everyone talks about the two worlds that they have to dance because of the changing climate and thus because of their changing life.
My name is Belal Nakok, and I was born in a camp outside Pengnirtung before we were forced to move to the community to go to school. It was the time that the government were just setting up federal residential school system. At the same time, the federal government slaughtered all the dogs across the Arctic. So our parents had no form of transportation for survival. That's why they were forced as well to move to the same location. There's a big change in the climate. It's much warmer in the summer, and the season is getting earlier and earlier. And here, it was normal that the ice is gone late August. And now, last year, we were born in June 22nd. But there are consequences. As we all know, there are always consequences when something abnormal happens in a cycle that's been going on for many, many years.
Collecting stories is an important facet of not only understanding climate change and providing an education to the general public, but it's a tradition that cannot be lost, that if we don't capture it now, it's truly lost forever. So it's not only an insight into where the climate has been, but where it's now and possibly where it's going.
Seasons are earlier, especially like spring used to be late, but now it's getting earlier and earlier and earlier. It's kind of hard to predict how it is now, right? Because the last 20 years, what the elders are saying, that the weather has changed quite a bit.
So we've been collecting these stories for the last 2 weeks that are only the start of this collection of the tapestry of voices from throughout the entire world. And you can actually follow along at n60.co. That's the project here in the Arctic, and you can also see all the other voices that have been collected at chasingseals.com. So these are some of the stories that we were collecting as we traveled across the Arctic, and also we went and worked with all the schools within the Arctic to engage them with the project so they could upload their own videos and their own stories, building that tapestry of voices. And this video here that we shot is what we shot when we were actually out there skiing across the Arctic, spending time with the elders, and then we did all the editing in the tent, and we sent it out via satellite technologies. So what we had captured was then immediately to the students, and we were in a place where there was no connectivity other than our satellite, and as you could see on the back of my slide, it was solar power. So that's what we were doing, trying to engage these people and get them excited. And that was also leads me to number 4, to recognize the learners as experts. There's so much that our students themselves can share, especially when you do an online learning environment like North of 60 or Go North, where we travel the entire world, is that, yes, we create this curriculum, we create this online learning environment, but the students themselves have a story to be told. And that came to me in 2006 when I was traveling across the Alaskan Arctic, and we were about up to Kaktovik, which is on the northeast side of it, and we were doing all this work on flora and fauna and climate change, and one of the elders in the community said, you know what, my students would love to share their story. My students would love to document what it is that they're going through from a whaling community perspective. And so, although this might not look exciting today, in 2006, this was one of the first blogs that came out of the Arctic as they were starting to talk about their life, what it means to live in a whaling community, and how they want to share their story. Also, we are designing learning environments where students can upload their own videos.
And here's Drew and Danny with the news. You're watching The Drew and Danny Show.
And so as you take a look at this, this was one of our first designs back in 2005 where students themselves were making their videos and uploading it to the learning environment. We wanted them to be able to share their experience. And that led me to also one of my next environments that I'd like to share with you, and this environment is called Geothentic. I used to work for the National Geographic Society, and obviously I have a lot of passion for the environment, passion for culture. And one of the issues that they were facing is how do we teach students to learn, and how do we help teachers teach geography using geospatial technologies. And this environment, as one of the teachers said, it's one that lets the students decide for themselves, and that's exactly what I wanted to see. So we designed a learning environment where there are numerous different types of modules. For example, the first one is where to build a hospital in San Francisco. And what you do is you look at all these different layers of data, and you analyze it, and then you place where the best region is to put a hospital within this area. So we designed this entire learning environment, and it was one of the first ones also based on TPAC, which I'll talk about in a little bit, about technology, pedagogy, and content from the work of Misher and Kohler. The other thing that was really inspiring to me was the work of Bransford and how he did all his work on what was called anchored-based instruction, which you probably have heard about. And I thought, why not bring that in and get students excited about geography and about geospatial technologies if that is possible? So what we designed is what I call the situated movie, where they would watch this in the beginning of every single module.
This is breaking news from WGIS. I'm Daryl Richardson. The city of San Francisco needs your help. The San Francisco Urban Planning Board has proposed the development of a new hospital and is requesting recommendations on where the new hospital should be built.
And so what we did is we actually worked with a news anchor and we captured these videos, we wrote the script, we put it together in order it could situate the tasks that the students were to solve with geospatial technologies within the environment. And it worked extremely well. And all these environments that I'm sharing with you today, by the way, are free and can be accessed at any time. And the final result is one such as this, where they are doing their analysis within Google Earth, or if you have it, ArcView, if you're into GIS, and the students are analyzing all these different layers, and then they're putting up their rationale, such as this one here that says, I put my hospital at this location because the population is in the highest group, so there is enough people to support it, and there are very few hospitals within the area, so people will be forced to be here. Also, there's high ground shaking amplification, so many people will be affected by a minor earthquake. So they did all this analysis, put their location in this place, and then we built the whole back end to the learning environment where they could put the lat and long and their justification in, and you can submit it right to the teacher. So even in all these environments that I'm sharing with you, I'm showing you the front end of it, but the back end is all these classroom management systems that makes it easy for the teacher to be able to integrate within their classroom. And number 5, encourage collaboration. You know, this is not rocket science to encourage collaboration, but how do we design a learning environment that actually achieves this? How can we work together without boundaries? Everyone, again, talks about it, but is it something that we can literally do with the platforms that are given to us? Can we do that? Well, here's some ways that I've looked at solving this problem. And the reason I think it's very important is because community is built at the point where our stories intersect. I've met so many amazing people already, and the community is being built because we're sharing our stories together. And that leads me to Earthducation. After traveling the Arctic for over a decade, I came to find out that there was this disconnect between the way that students were being educated and what they needed to sustain themselves on the land. So for example, in the Canadian Arctic, they were getting educated by a Canadian written curriculum that had no focus on the Inuit traditional knowledge. And so, although the elders are going out on the land and they're hunting caribou and they're fishing Arctic char, there was none of that in the classroom. Because the world is changing, I wanted to see how there was this intersection between education and sustainability literally around the world. So I wanted to go and ask people, what is education to you, what is sustainability to you, and where do they intersect? And I wrote this crazy grant, and it got funded, where I would go to every single continent and ask people that question. And so this is where we've gone so far. We traveled throughout the Arctic. We traveled to South America, to the Amazon, to we went to Ouagadougou and Burkina Faso on the western side of Africa, up to Fennoscandia, northern Norway. We traveled all the way across Australia. And what we have next are Asia. So we're focusing on Mongolia, and I don't know where else we're going yet. We're still making that decision, and then ending up in Antarctica. And just like my other projects, what we did is we designed a learning environment that people can log on, and what we are doing is that we are updating it real time as we are traveling to these locations, and then also it can be used in the classroom thereafter. And so at any time, someone can log on, experience what we are experiencing. As you see here, we're not only writing the updates based on the data that we're collecting, we're capturing the stories through audio, through video, through pictures, and we're sharing it with the world as much as we possibly can. And here's a little insight into your great country. Mike, here we go.
In March of 2012, we traveled to Australia for Earthducation Expedition 3. We explored the intersection of education and sustainability throughout this vast continent. We traveled over 5,000 miles by car, plane, and boat, and captured more than 20 hours of video, over 500 gigabytes of data, and interviewed over 40 individuals. After arriving in Sydney, we flew north to Elcho Island and visited Galawinku, the largest Arnhem Land Aboriginal community. We first interviewed Ralph Marayumba Garawura, a senior ranger on Elcho Island.
My goal is to bring those two worlds and put them in the balance, and to see the young ones to learn to have skills in both cultures.
Our host on the island was Brian Hughes, principal of Shepperton College, the local K-12 community education center.
We'll actually employ the clan leaders to come into school and not take classes of kids out, but take kids that belong to their own clan out and teach them traditional fishing as well as normal fishing. So that sustainable type concept of work that is unpaid, but you take fish home to your family. So in a sense, it's just another form of payment.
We then flew to Cairns and traveled south to Charters Towers to visit a cattle ranch owned and operated by Roger Landsberg. Roger provided insight into his sustainable approach to grazing that is being researched and adopted by others in the area.
To be able to do the best you can with that, not only for the sake of the environment or the animals or native animals that live there or the native ecosystem, but then be able to get a living out of that and then make a good living without detriment to the landscape. That's what it means to me. I think that makes me feel proud, and it's something that I try to instill in my kids and anyone who comes here.
Before leaving Queensland, we visited the Great Barrier Reef, where we explored the significance of using a world-renowned tourist attraction to provide education and awareness on protecting the environment.
We're on the Great Barrier Reef. Now we're in the furthest point out on the Great Barrier Reef toward the continental shelf off Cairns. Let's sort of try and educate people a little bit about the environment out here. So pretty much the education is all about not only preserving the reef, but preserving human life as well.
While in Australia, we discovered a strong connection between the environment, community, education, and the economy. Whether it's ranching, ecotourism, or cultural and educational advancement, sustainability is a critical element throughout Australia. These stories and more can be...
And that leads me to the next interview with one of the most impressive elders that I interviewed, talking about his culture and the role of language.
Study about your language. If you come around to Arnhem Land of Australia, with the Northern Territory, you're learning to my language. Important thing is so that you can understand my language, my background, where I came from. And you will learning about me. I will learning about you.
Find my job here.
So what are the things that you've seen change in your lifetime here on the island?
I need to change to help my people, or to help my people for passing over the generations and our knowledge.
So the story that I was trying to capture along the way is the story that the elders wanted to share with me, as well as others throughout Australia or any of the other regions that we traveled to. We thought that to create a community, we need to do more than us going out there, capturing it, and then sharing online. How can we design a learning environment that can do that? So we created what's called the Enviro Network. And within this Enviro Network, anyone can log on. They can share their perspective on education and sustainability and share it with the world. So now it's not only our capturing of the videos, now everyone else can log on and share their perspectives, as you see here. And we create one of these for every single environment that we develop. So that then gave birth to even more. And we thought, okay, if we can get people to talk in an online environment, to collaborate, why don't we create a technology that anyone can integrate in their MOOC, in their online learning system, whatever it might be. And thus, Flipgrid was born. And Flipgrid is the newest technology to come out of the Media Lab, where you can log on. In fact, I sent it out to some of you who are participating in the workshop tomorrow, that anyone can log on, and you can participate through collaboration of video. And within this environment, it continually builds the grids as you go from maybe 10 learners to thousands of learners. And you have a minute and a half to be able to capture your video, and it doesn't matter if you are on a 56K modem or if you have high speed, you're able to capture it, and that's what we wanted to be able to do. And it now is going to be released also on an app coming next week. So that was Flipgrid. And when you take a look at all these technologies, one thing that you hopefully see across the spectrum is that the role of aesthetics. Many times aesthetics is at the end of design, meaning they don't think about what it looks like and the usability and the utility of it. But just think about all the learning environments that people can go to. Why do you want them to go to yours? And why do you want them to keep coming back? And so the role of aesthetics has a great role in the work that we do at the Media Lab. If it's WeExplore, the environment I'm going to share with you, north of 60, Flipgrid, or Geothentic. So think about that when you're designing your learning environments. How are you going to get the student to come back? And that leads me to self-narrative, principle number 7. Think about when you have a great experience. Hopefully you have this amazing experience here at the conference, and what you're going to do is you're going to text. Maybe you're texting someone right now. Maybe you're tweeting right now, and you're sharing it with the world. You want the self-narrative, and that's what I call the referencing of the experience. If you went on a great date the other night, what you probably did is told your best friend about it. Well, that's what we want to have about the experiences in the classroom. And these experiences, about referencing the experience, we would hope also lead to this discussion around real-world issues, which everyone says that we should be talking about. And a quick little story on that is, how do you design it? Well, you need something that's motivating to the learner, that they're going to come back. Much like my adventure learning, where we have a beginning, a heightened experience, and an end, students are part of the entire adventure. This is from 2004. In 2004, we had what was called Timber Tales. In Timber Tales, it was what was happening on the trail from the perspective of one of our dogs named Timber. All right? And so what we did is all this analysis, and what we found out was that there were literally millions of learners that went to this page because they wanted to see what was happening on the trail from the perspective of one of our dogs. And we wrote that in order to engage them. Well, after 6 months, if you can imagine living in a tent for 6 months, having no trees, not even smelling that, we returned to the Minneapolis airport. We went down the escalator, and there were literally hundreds of students that had come in order to welcome us back, that had been learning with us online in the environment. And what we quickly came to find out, that they weren't there because they loved us, they were there because they loved Timber. And they wanted Timber for president. And that was the referencing of the experience, because they kept on talking about Timber and the role that he had in the learning. Number 8, reference the knowledge domains. TPAC is pretty in vogue right now. Everyone's talking about the work of Mishra and Kohler and how we should really bring this into the design. And that's actually what Geothentic was based on. And if you don't know this real quick, we knew that in the beginning, Shulman talked about this intersection of pedagogy and content, a PCK. And that's where this teacher wanted to be, was right in that center. Well, then as we know, we have one more domain, and that is technology. And how do you get yourself to that center? And how do we assess it? How do we provide professional development? And that is, I think, some of the arguments that we're having around it is that, okay, it's a great framework, but what can we do with it? How can we assess learners? How can we move to that center ourselves and help others? Well, one of the things that we're doing at the lab is I've been working around this idea of building an app so that teachers can do some self-assessment as well as assess others on their technological, pedagogical content knowledge. And this app is almost done, but we're still in the development of it. And what it's going to provide is a scaffolding tool for teachers to be able to assess where they are and where they need to go with their TPAC. And so as we're working on this, what we're trying to do in all the different ways, like here you're assessing your pedagogy, your content, and your technology, but it's not only the technology that you have, but it's the technology that you can use. One of my arguments in the beginning of the discussion around TPAC is that you can be right in the center, but if you don't have the technology and the support to be able to integrate it in your classroom, it's going to be not helpful, right? You need to have that context in order to support that integration. And that leads me to number 9, innovate. Latch, when he responded to one of my questions about technology transformation, he immediately went to pedagogy and innovation, and that's exactly what it comes down to. It's like the great media debate in our field. Do media influence learning? Is it the media or is it the pedagogy? So what is it, and how is it that we're going to make that change? What we know is that it is the pedagogy. It's us that's going to make that difference. And maybe it's such that we can design our technology with the pedagogy within it to make that change. Because look at our history. Motion picture is destined to revolutionize our education system, and that in a few years it will supplant largely, if not entirely, the use of textbooks. Did that happen? No, it did not. The computer is a catalyst of deep and radical change in the educational system. That was in '84. Think where it's at now today. Think about 1999. Education over the internet is going to be so big it's going to make email usage look like a rounding error. All right, we're getting there, but we still are working towards that goal. And I'd like to show this video here real quickly because what it does is shows us how we're quickly changing and where we need to go.
I stand before you today to apologize. The system has failed you. I have failed you. I have failed to help you share your talent with the world, and the world needs talent more than ever, yet it's being wasted every day by an educational system steeped in tradition and old ideas. Well, it's time for a new tradition. It's time to realize talent isn't just in schools like this one. It's everywhere. It's time to use technology to rewrite the rules of education. To learn how you learn so we can teach you better. It's time a university adapted to you rather than you adapting to it. It's time for a different kind of university. It's your time.
Think about that. I just love that video because it's so exciting to me to be in this field, look at what we have in front of us and how we can be part of this change, and that's exactly what we want to be doing. You know, in all the work that I've done with my adventure learning around the world, the one thing that I get criticized about is how do we do it? How do I get involved with adventure learning? Because I can't write these grants to get millions of dollars. How can I do my own adventure learning? And I took that to heart years ago. And we designed a new approach. This is the model. We're not going to talk about this right now. But we designed an approach and a learning environment. And this learning environment, which was actually just released 2 weeks ago, is something I've been working on for actually a couple of years. And what it does is it provides you the opportunity now to do your own adventure learning environments. And so what you're able to do is that you're able to log on, and you're able to get your students to go out into the environment themselves and document whatever project it is that they want to do. If they want to focus on Africa, the Apostle Islands, counting frogs, wildlife under threat, everyone has a base camp. And you're able to log in. You're able to select who is going to be on your team. And you are going to build this environment. As you can see on the right-hand side, it can showcase all your expeditions. Here you click on the expedition and it shows the ones that have been completed, and the ones that are in progress are on the ones on the bottom. And as we move through this, what we're able to do is click on the map, and we're able to see where all the expeditions are taking it on across the world. So the goal is to have this WeExplore environment where we have adventure learning projects literally being showcased throughout the entire world. And again, we'll be working with this at the workshop tomorrow. But again, it's about engaging, it's about bringing the technology to the learner and designing it in a way that works so well that they want to keep on coming back. And as you see here, we click on the map, and then it'll actually go and showcase if the project is in progress, it is still gray. Once it's completed, it turns yellow. And so this is, again, a technology that you can use. So instead of having your students do, it could be a paper, they could actually do it within the WeExplore environment and write it in that way using all the various media artifacts that they wanted to. That takes me to my 9.5 principle. And that is to design as a learner. I always ask my students, when you are designing your learning environment, when you're sketching it out, when you're building it, when you're thinking about your pedagogy, when you're thinking about how you're going to design in Moodle, in Coursera, whatever it is, would you want to be sitting in your classroom? Would you want to actually sit there, listen to it, take it, and enroll with it and keep going with it? Really? I mean, ask yourself that question, because I want to create environments that students are excited about. We've been spending hours thinking about how we're going to design this new MOOC that I'll be delivering in January. I fought it at first. I wasn't going to do it, but now I'm jumping in and we're going fast forward, and I want people to come to this environment and get excited about it. Come back, check in, learn from others, learn with me. That's what I want. And it's like this quote here, it's a miracle curiosity survives formal education. Well, it's our challenge now to keep that curiosity going forward. That picture was actually taken in Burkina Faso, in a small village outside of Ouagadougou, when I ordered chicken for dinner, and it was definitely fresh, as you can see. It was fantastic. So let's take a look at the 9.5 principles that I have just talked about. I said what we want to do is that we want to design experiences. We want students to be engaged and not just go forward with completion. We want to build trust, and we build trust by the way we design our learning environments, because the first thing that they see is the design of our learning environment, and then hopefully us have that social presence that we want. Guide learners as designers. Constructivism, yep, it's very in vogue also, but what we know is that many times it's not efficient. So how do we take this idea of constructivism, bring it into the classroom, and still be efficient with delivering the content? Number 4, recognize our learners as experts. Scaffold them. Help them out. Let them share their story. And as you can see, be it Flipgrid, be it WeExplore, all these different environments allow learners to be able to share their stories as experts. And it also leads to the 5th principle, which is encouraging collaboration. And this is more than just your typical respond on the discussion board. This is through video, through audio, ways that are going to engage the learner. Have the delight in aesthetics. Be excited about what it is that's being delivered and the way that you're designing it. And think about the aesthetics of this design, be it the usability and the utility. Inspire self-narrative. Just like the students talked about timber, you should want your students to be talking and tweeting about your class and how you're engaging them at the level that you never thought was possible before. Number 8, reference to knowledge domains. What I mean by that is when you design your learning environments, you need to think about the technology, the pedagogy, and the content. You absolutely do. And you need to give them the scaffolds in order to get them to that level. Within the Geothentic environment, we are actually doing all these screen capture videos, so if they have no idea what geospatial technologies is about, then they can learn through this format. Number 9, innovate. Meaning that it still comes down to the pedagogy. Yep, we can design an amazing environment, but it comes down to us and how we work within that environment and how we teach within it, with excitement, with passion. As I say to my colleagues, we want people in education that are here to make a difference. We want people who are here to inspire. That's our job, and that's how we need to look at our design and our delivery of our learning environments. And number 9.5, is design as a learner. Ask yourself, would you want to be in this environment yourself? And that leads me to the final video. So many people ask me, well, Aaron, you've traveled around the world. what's some of your best experiences that you've ever had? What are some of your favorite photos? So I put a little montage together here in order that you can get a little snippet of this beautiful world that we have and the great task that we have ahead of us in order to encourage the collaboration through learning technologies. So let's take a look.
Avaniyo, avan tinga, kawari jawara, itu mahyak tahamah, nanawati huam, mikit waktu huam, itu mahtahamah huam, itu mahani dua huam, tangi yung huamiyo, biniel wathamah. Addoyo lunangunelu lunija angoqattelagalun tannayo arnahyabalun niqissartaqattagal puussakimmiarlu
So as you see this picture here, I was standing on the ice with my mucklucks, as they're called, thinking about where I was going to go next on my expedition. The challenge is now put out to you is to figure out where you're going to go next to inspire, to make a difference with technology and learning. So again, thank you very much for the invitation to be able to speak to you today. And I look forward to speaking to you here at the conference and also online. Thank you very much.
All I can say is, as a university professor, Dr. Doering leads a very exciting life. I think mine is relatively mundane. Okay, folks, thank you so much for listening to his address, and thank you for that talk. I think that perhaps you might like to participate in some questions and pose some queries to Dr. Doering. Any questions from the floor, please? Well, while you're getting warmed up, I've received some questions on the tablet.
Oh, great.
So let me read it out. It's a question from Andy, and the question is this, Dr. Doering. It is never a linear pattern, story, design, instructor. It is a network or an iterative process at worst. Can you comment on that based on your experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. What he's talking about there, I'm assuming, is the idea of when you look at traditional instructional design, it's not too traditional in our world. At least I would argue that. It's kind of the debate between instructional design and learning sciences. We don't write to the same journal, unfortunately. We don't work together on many projects like we should. What he's talking about is what I would refer to as design-based research, and it's the iterative process to the way that we design and develop our online learning environments. What happens way too often is that the evaluation or the assessment phase is at the end and you're out of money, and therefore when it comes to improving your learning environment, it never gets improved because you've run out of money. And thus what I do in my grants and the work that I teach my students is that right from the very beginning, you need to have an iterative process like he's talking about in order to have the assessment in the very beginning in order to make a difference. So how do I do it? In Geothentic, for example, what I did from the very beginning is I brought teachers in to the classroom. I had them use it, and we went through the process time and time again. So I brought the teachers in actually 3 times. It's not easy, but that's also the really nice thing about running a lab. At that point, I wasn't running a lab, but when you have a lab, You need those changes made, they're done immediately. When I worked at National Geographic, when we wanted to change, it took a long time. Now we can make those changes and actually have that DBR, that design-based research approach that I think he's referring to here.
Thank you. Any questions from the floor? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Lao Tang Ching from medicine. So I'm really inspired by your talk today, but what I thought maybe more inspiring as well is what actually inspired you and maybe your team to work so hard at this. Because I think though we are inspired today, but the inertia to change and to gather the team and the resources is going to be something that will be very challenging. And I thought you may just share with us a little bit how to break away from this inertia.
Well, thank you. That's very kind to say that. And you know, you bring up a good question. And a lot of people ask about how much these projects were funded for. And they're very small grants. I can tell you that. They're very, very small. There were many NSF grants that received millions of dollars. Many of these were foundation grants that were $100,000 or $200,000. And in the scheme of things, that's very, very small. And related to that, I guess I was always driven to make that difference with the small dollars I had because I wanted to see if I could do something better than I've done before, and then also hopefully that would lead to subsequent funding down the line. I also have a passion for people. I love to meet people. I love to get their stories to be shared with the world. And so when we were designing all these learning environments, we constantly were trying to do a better job than what we did before. Now, with it comes cost, right? Because if you are constantly working on designing these learning environments, you're constantly traveling, you're constantly writing books, you're constantly teaching, you know, it takes a toll on one's life, too. That's a whole nother story that we can talk about at the cocktail hour. But it really does. And so I think it is this challenge. I think another thing that you have to have a driver, but also you have to have a good team. Now, people always think that my team is like 10 people. Well, until 2 years ago, I didn't even have a lab. And it was me and maybe 2 other people at most, literally 3 of us. Now at the lab, we do have some more individuals, but it's still a challenge to be able to get the work done and get it done at the timely manner. So I appreciate you saying that, and I think that is the challenge. You know, I was just reviewing a tenure file for an individual going up for tenure before I came. Before I got on the plane, I had to get it submitted, and the work that he had done was amazing in the sense of his publications, and I think that is one of the questions that we have to ask ourselves. How do we inspire people? And I think that we need to do that by letting them go down their line of passion. My passion was the environment. My passion, my master's was in geography. And I wanted from the very beginning to tie those two together with technology. And if we can bring this together with the faculty and let them follow their passion and also give them the right to fail, meaning that, okay, it's okay to do this, and if you fail, what you're going to do is you're going to get back up and you're going to try harder the next time. And that is one thing that I always told my staff, and I guess one model that I also live by.
Thank you. Yes, gentleman in green, and then the lady in red. Yes.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Very inspiring, but one also wonder if it's more personality-driven than systemic, because it takes someone of your passion to be able to bring this into fruition, which means that as we change the pedagogy and we try and force teaching to change, it's going to be a rather hopeless task because there's only 1% of you, of people like you, out there. Okay? Now that's the first point, statement, perhaps a question for you to respond to. The second is in the term of assessment. It will be very interesting for you to go back and look at your K-12 experience, because at a university and perhaps a postgrad level, you are truly tertiary. That means after that, your graduates, when they apply for jobs, can call on this as the only resume for them to get a job. Now, when you teach at a polytechnic or a junior college or a college or secondary school, we still fall back into the whole academic trap of having to prepare the students for entrance into a tertiary university. Now, unless the universities of the world is prepared to conduct 1,000 interviews and see each student's uniqueness, we still go back to being stuck at the grade. Now, systems like this are wonderful. The problem is it's very easy to see the motivated one. They'll be the one filling the blocks. Our worry is we teach a class of 40, there's going to be 38 of them is going to be free rider in the system, and that's the problem. The worry that we benefit the few, and then we lose the masses. So perhaps your response to that. Thank you.
I think you bring up a very good point. Yeah, first of all, I think we can motivate and inspire everyone. I absolutely do. There's students in the Arctic. You know, one of the biggest challenges in the Arctic right now is actually suicide rates are extremely high. I mean, it's a long story, but I wanted to inspire them to get out and share their story, to be able to engage with the elders, which is absolutely needed. But you bring up also the point of, so that was just saying that, yes, I do believe that we can inspire people, and we have to keep trying. We cannot just give up and say that, oh, you know what, I'm only going to inspire 2 people in my class, so I guess I'm done for the day. We can't say that. Now, in the sense of how do we actually continually reach these learners, it's almost like writing the textbook. The textbook, to me, I wanted to go on a completely different path, but they kept on bringing me back because they said, you know what, you need to touch on this, this, and this, because this is actually what's happening in the trenches, right? This is what's happening in the K-12 and the junior colleges and so on. But my response to that is, yes, we can do that, but also we can do the learning environments that I've developed here, because it can bring in the learners and have them collaborate. You know, everyone speaks constructivism and talks about how it's the greatest thing ever. Yes, it's a great thing, but everything has to be a mixed recipe, meaning that you're not going to be efficient in a classroom unless you lecture and you give them the constructivist activities at the same time. I feel your frustration, especially when you're teaching. You know, my focus is mostly on research now, right? But you know, at the junior colleges, they're teaching 6-8 classes a semester, and it's like, how in the world are you supposed to meet the needs of all those learners and also have a life yourself and then also do something exciting? And so I think also that challenge comes back to me. In all these learning environments, I think one of the struggles is how do you assess within them? Okay, these are informal learning environments, and there's many discussions in the States where you take an informal or constructivist CLE, constructive learning environment like this, bring it into the classroom, and where does it fit within a standards-based classroom? Right? And so how are you having that systemic change across time like you're referring to? So as you can see, I don't have the answer. But what we do need to do is just keep on working towards that goal. And hopefully the MOOC actually will have some impact on bringing the learners together to be motivated about it. But it's like, you know, look at the United States government right now. They can't even get along, right? And what we're trying to do is make a change in technology and education. And I think what we have to do is keep working towards that goal through the design and through the pedagogy. And always, hopefully, you know, that's, you know, I'm getting on my soapbox here a little bit, but that's the problem. I think, you know, that's why I loved when the provost was talking about scaffolding and affordances. Who knows about affordances as a provost? Right? I have not heard that. Well, so you actually have a leader, an administrator, who knows what they're talking about. That's usually not the case, right? And so you need that support. that you need to have that support from the thing. And that was what I'm saying is that he knows what's going on. And so because he knows what's going on, you see how beautiful it is here. Because I can tell you there's many administrators that I've worked for does not know what's going on in my classroom or doesn't even know our literature.
Next question, please.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Lei from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences of NUS. Thank you very much for your fascinating presentation. I feel very inspired by your passion for technology and for people and to make a change. I have not really a question, but some sort of concern. For example, for many of us as teachers, we are into technology, but maybe we are at the same time feeling overwhelmed by the new technology emerging. So at a point, like, for example, some people may use too many kinds of technology in the classroom, but maybe not for very effective learning outcomes. At the same time, many of us have some sort of resistance to change and feel like, oh, our students are more technology savvy than us, then we don't have that, we are not up to that standard. So for example, our university has had an e-learning week this semester, and I talked to many of my colleagues and students, and many of them were excited about that and thought that was a positive change, but at the same time, many of them complain a lot about that and say, oh, I didn't really enjoy it that much, I still prefer the face-to-face classroom and interaction and something like that. So I would like to hear maybe your comments or suggestions on this topic. Thank you.
Do you want to talk a little bit about, So you're talking about the challenges that you have in the classroom, about inspiration, about keeping the students coming back. What do you think one of your biggest challenges is? To keep motivated. And the other thing that you talked about was keeping up with the changes of the technology, and that the students you always feel that they're ahead of time. What I tell my teachers, because we also teach a lot of K-12 teachers within our area, is that to focus on one technology and know it extremely well, and integrate that into the classroom. And if that's a technology that's focused on collaboration, I think you will win. So an example is Flipgrid. Within Flipgrid, you can truly encourage collaboration by using this video. Students absolutely love it. And even if they don't want to show their face, have them draw something and hold it up to the camera instead. Because there's different pedagogical strategies that I've seen used in the classroom and use it well. Also, I think that that's one of the challenges is that that confidence that teachers have to have. And again, that's where that principal learners as experts, you need to bring that into it, because it's okay to ask your student, how do I do this, and can you help me out with it? But people still aren't comfortable with that. You still are the content-based professor. I mean, you know this content well. And just because you don't know the technology as well doesn't mean you should give up. What you should do is you should learn one technology very well and use it. And so use something like Flipgrid, use something like WeExplore to get them to collaborate. That's my suggestions, because otherwise if you look at, that's what I think a problem is with a lot of the technology conferences, is that there's so many choices. Someone goes in and they become overwhelmed. Find one or two things that you like, focus in on it, and work forward to that.
I'd like to pose one more question that has been tweeted in. It's a question from Linda. So Dr. Doering, how would you lead learning for educators so that they can connect better with their students? How would you lead learning for educators so that they can connect better with their students?
Well, I think I feel like I'm in a PhD exam a little bit. That was a very good question. That was a very good question. So I think the first question is it face-to-face or online? I really do. And I think the first thing that we need to do in order to encourage that collaboration and be a leader is the way that we design our learning environments. I would love to, and I'll spend some time on this tomorrow, but the aesthetics of it, the usability, and the utility of it. And so when students come to my online courses, the first thing they do is a welcome video from me. And this is not a video that has, I never look like this. This is the first time I wore a suit in years, right? And it's just me talking to the students, say, hey, welcome. This is Module 6. What we're focusing on here is the role of TPAC within the classroom. This is what you're going to be doing this week. And so that's the first thing that they see is me welcoming them. They go into the module, and then they have a complete overview where I do a screen capture of it, and I guide them into it. So if they have any question at all, they can rewind it and they can watch it. And I do that every single week. And it becomes part of our exchange with each other. I use Twitter. I take a hashtag for one of my classes, like hashtag CI5331. I have students tweet to it their articles that they find, fun facts, and it shows up in the learning environment. And so they see their work, and so they're tweeting to it. They see themselves within it because they're using Flipgrid. So it's all these things so that they can see themselves, so that they're not on an island, but they're part of the entire experience themselves. So that's what I think we have to do, is be leaders within that environment. In a face-to-face classroom, it's the same thing. I think that what we need to do, though, is think about how we design our face-to-face classroom, the activities, the aesthetics of it, and so on, which, again, are many times overlooked.
Thank you for that. Let us show our appreciation to Dr. Doering for his inspiring talk.